Welcome to the UPSC 2022 essay paper analysis. In this series of videos, what I'm going to do is take you through each one of the essay topics which were asked in the UPSC exam. And before I do that, there are a few caveats, a few things you should know, you should be aware of before we get into it. And the first thing is that it was on expected lines. The UPSC essay paper was on expected lines. There were abstract statements, some were ethical, some were philosophical, some were, in fact, about English literature, and I'll tell you about those. But the point being that none of them were very particular GS type content based questions. These were abstract topics, and abstract topics essentially means that you could write about it in multiple ways. You could write about it from a personal point of view, although I don't recommend that. You could write about that using poems. So there were a number of ways you can handle each of these, and everyone would have written something differently. Okay. And a lot, I repeat, this is with emphasis, which I want to add here, would depend on how you write it rather than what you write. So the content of the essay, तो कंटेंट भी आप जो भी आपने लिखा है, एग्जांपल्स लिखे हैं, डेटा लिखी है, किसी के साथ भी उसको कनेक्ट किया है, इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ, जो भी आपने कंटेंट उसमें यूज किया है वो ठीक है, but that is not the determining factor. The determining factor will be how well it is written, how well it reads, and how well it answers the topic completely. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead with this series of videos. Please have this in mind, because as I discuss some of these topics, I will share my ideas and I will share what the topic really is. And some of these things might seem a little bit intimidating to you because you may not have read about this. All right. I know about most of these things because I have an interest in general reading and I have encountered many of these things before. So with that caveat, with that knowledge that the content is less important than the way you write it, I am going to address what content would be most appropriate, which would fit very well, how the essay topic could have been tackled, what are the essential points which would be good to have inserted, which are likely to get you a bullseye as far as the content is concerned. Remember, I cannot comment on how well you have written it because I don't know what you wrote. Okay, I can tell you what I would have written. I can tell you what might fit very well in this topic. I can tell you what the topic is about. So what you will be able to do is appreciate the essay topic, and also you will be able to eliminate blunders. So you will know at least that this is something which I have not written, or this is something I've written, or at least this is my understanding of the topic was okay. So that much you will get from these discussions. But so the mindset should be to enjoy and to experience the intellectual debate, which many of these topics include, which many of these topics instigate us to get into. The first topic, and this is a really interesting one. Forests are the best case study for economic excellence. Now, many people would know already that there is something called deconstruction. In deconstruction, we break up the essay topic into two main parts, two things which the essay topic is made up of. In this, you are smart enough to realize that one thing is forests, the other thing is economic excellence. These are the two things it is about. Then the essay topic says that forests are the best case study for economic excellence. So it describes some relationship between the two. Now, why does it say this? And more importantly, what is economic excellence? Forests, we all know. Forests, we don't need to get into. We know what they are. But after a few minutes of discussion, you will have a new appreciation for forests. I can guarantee that. So what is economic excellence? Economic excellence essentially means not just a good economy, not just the part of the world which we associate with money, commerce, foreign exchange, GDP, goods and services, taxation. No, not just that. Everything economical means everything that has a cost and benefit, everything that has a pro and con, everything that has supply and demand. Everything, including your body, the human body also, a great example of economic excellence. It doesn't waste anything. If you think about it, if you eat too much food, for instance, the human body is so smart, so intelligent, and so economically efficient that it will not let anything go to waste. If you eat more calories than you need, it will store the extra calories as fat. Why will it store it as fat? Because it knows that maybe in a future time where you don't get enough supply of food, maybe you will be able to fall upon that stored fat for survival in a state of fasting. That is the reason the body stores fat. In the same spirit, the forests do much of this. What is a forest now? So economic excellence is something which doesn't allow wastage, which is very efficient, and which is basically takes care of all its parts, and it's basically a self-sustained system. I'll give you some examples of this. What about forests now? What are these forests? Why are they being compared to case studies for economic excellence? What makes them such? The fact is that forests are self-sustaining ecosystems which are able to cater to many species, plants, animals, fungi, you name it. All these species are able to live in harmony. Well, although it's a food chain which goes on there, it's not exact harmony, but we'll discuss that later. They are able to survive there. They are able to have sustained lifestyles there. Animals which are carnivorous, animals which are herbivores, insects, fungi, bacteria, viruses, all living creatures are able to live in that ecosystem, in the forest. The forest provides for all. The forest is this system. The forest is a rich, integrated system and networked. It's a networked thing, much like an economy. So in this essay topic, you would have to draw parallels. You would have to draw parallels between forests and the economy. So like in the economy, you have various businesses, various stakeholders, different people, some in the agriculture industry, some in the service industry, some in the organized, unorganized sector, various things which go on in the economy. We have something similar going on in the forest as well. You have various different species, sometimes competing, right? Sometimes competing, like we do in the economy. Stakeholders compete. In a healthy economy, they definitely do. The forest doesn't allow for monopolies. Although everybody knows that the lion is the king of the forest. We know that there is something called an apex predator in the forest, in the food chain. The apex predator is a creature which is not hunted by anybody, by anything. It is the apex. Crocodiles are apex creatures. Lions and tigers are also apex creatures, right? But in the economy, there are no apex creatures as such, and it is the endeavor of governments to make sure that there are no apex predators in an economy. That is why you have monopolies. That is why you have competition commission, so that no one entity, no one conglomerate can dominate the whole system. The forest does this automatically. The forest doesn't need a competition commission. The forest already has a well-instituted, well-structured, deeply embedded system of intelligent design. So that's the beauty of it. That's why it's being compared to economic excellence. What other parallels can we draw? Well, there are many. Take the example of wastage. Do we have an issue with wastage in our economy or in any economy, or do economies have that issue? Generally, yes, we do. We do. A lot of the times we do that. We have an issue with wastage. We have issues in the economy with sections of the society which are not being taken care of, which have to be specially made provisions for, so that they are also able to enjoy the fruits of development. We have inflation in the economy. What is inflation? Oversupply of money, which basically makes everything more expensive. Forests don't have this issue. Forests don't have this problem of oversupply of food. There's always a balance between demand and supply. If some species increases, then the predators of that species also tend to increase in number because there is more food supply, right? And that is the reason the forests maintain this equilibrium. Another thing you can correlate with this economic brilliance and this economic efficiency is the fact that nothing goes to waste in a forest. Nothing goes to waste in a forest. You know, if when a creature dies or any living creature dies, the carcass becomes food for not only the animals which prey on it. It becomes a direct food source. It becomes a food source for scavengers. It becomes a food source for the soil itself. So the fundamental basis of the forest, the soil, the ground, the entire system, which is beneath the surface, which is not entirely visible, is also very much part of the system. That is a whole different level of efficiency, which we are not able to replicate in human economies, right? It is able to do that, right? The soil will absorb the nutrition. It does become this gateway, this highway of distributing nutrition amongst various plants and animals, particularly the plants. They have this whole structure underneath the ground of their roots. And these roots, they are not just latent. I mean, I don't know if you're inclined towards it, but this is a very interesting book I read, The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wollenben. And it really did change my mind about what forest. And I'm not recommending that you read these books because you don't have the time. That is why I will tell you what it means in short. So here's the thing, and the crux of it, this book and this essay topic. Forests are intelligent. They display intelligence in that they display efficiency. They display networking. They display a communication. Do you know that now many ecologists are in consensus that beneath the soil substrata, there is a whole network of information which is being exchanged between the trees. So the trees have roots underneath the soil. And think of a tree. So this is a tree. These are trees that you can see over here also. So think of a tree as an individual. Think of it as an individual, like I am an individual, you are an individual. But this individual is a creature with its head underneath the soil. Its head, our head is obviously upright. We're upright creatures. We're bipedal. We are primates. This creature is a one individual. This tree, one tree is one individual. The head beneath the soil. So its roots are like its nervous system. Its roots are like the neurons in our brain. And it is through these roots that it absorbs its nutrition. Obviously, it uses nutrition from the sunlight and it's very efficient with the whole system going on. But that is where the main action is happening, beneath the soil. And it turns out that when research is conducted on how they behave, so they are able to detect what is going on in the neighborhood. So for instance, if you have these trees, say these are 7-8 trees lined together in a forest, say that some parasite or some disease starts to afflict one tree. That tree will start to emit signals, chemical signals, and warn the other trees that there is a parasite, that there is a disease which is infecting me, and so make sure that it doesn't affect you. And so the trees increase their defenses. They do this. This is documented. They're intelligent. They are not latent creatures, which we think of as inanimate and stupid things. They are intelligent. And it is very possible that they feel. They are able to feel things. So anyway, that's about trees. Now, another interesting thing, and again, this is something very fascinating, really. You know, fungi, mycelium, fungus, mushrooms. That is it's a living organism which is not a plant. It's not an animal. Also, it's its own different kingdom. Fungi. These fungi are also intelligent, and most of these fungi, they're basically not, a mushroom is not a fungi. The real creature, the fungi, is this network, this mycelium. It's called mycelium. It is beneath the soil. And its fruit, its fruiting body is the mushroom. What we see growing above the ground and what is sometimes eaten is the mushroom. That's its fruiting body. The real individual is beneath the soil, and it's this network which is spread out across. And this network of mycelium, of mushroom, is responsible for transporting a lot of nutrition. It is used by the trees. This network is used by the trees to communicate between themselves. There is evidence of trees giving nutrition to a tree which needs it, literally lending nutrition. At times when a tree is cut or at times when a tree is injured, the trees surrounding it will actually shelter it, give the canopy. It will start to bend towards that other tree and make sure that it has the adequate shade and gets adequate sunlight. So they do this. This is all true. And this is fascinating. And so that essentially, these themes is what the essay topic is about. Another interesting thing, which parallel between the economy and the tree, The concept of inclusive growth. You see, inclusive growth, which is the buzzword, I mean, it's everywhere, and you have to talk about inclusive growth if you are talking about economics these days, particularly Indian economics. So, inclusive growth essentially means that growth which does not allow anybody else to, it doesn't allow stakeholders to be left out, includes everything, inclusive growth. Forests are prime example of this. They don't leave anybody out. All creatures, various size and various proclivities, are able to make a living there. However, and now this is the important part, I have so far spoken in favor of the uh, motion. I have spoken in favor of the topic. I haven't really counter-argued it. And I do not think that the essay topic would be complete until I counter-argue it. So what is the counter-argument here? The counter-argument is that forests are maybe the best stores of economic excellence. And they may be very inclusive and they are well integrated ecosystem, but it's nature. Nature is ruthless. It is raw. It is red in tooth and claw. Okay. Animals and species which are not able to survive are eliminated ruthlessly. Okay. We don't do that in our economies. We try to make sure that everybody is included and that nobody is left out. Our system may be hard, but it is not as ruthless as nature is. Nothing more ruthless than nature, right? Nobody is spared. Weakness is punished. So there is no point in only glorifying nature and only glorifying forest. We have to add a word or two about the fact that yes, there is much to be learned from forest. So certainly there is. There's no question about that. But at the same time, the forest and the ecosystem is an example of nature's design. It's nature's design. Whereas economies, the ones which we are referring to, are man-made structures, right? And so they are the result of our intelligent design. And so while there are a lot of things which we may take from forests, which we may wish to improve upon, and definitely their efficiency is one of them. There are things which we may be able to do better, And so a conclusion like this could be drawn. And I've given you some ideas which I find very fascinating, very interesting. But yes, essentially, that is what the essay topic is about. You have to draw parallels between forests, why they're efficient, why they do not allow wastage, what goes on there, and economics, and what humans can learn from forests. What are they able to get? What is the takeaway for us in our lives, in our systems, in our governments, in our societies, in our communities? How can we be more economically efficient? By taking a leaf, so to speak, from the pages of the forest. That's your topic, ladies and gentlemen, and that's all there is to it. If you touched upon these themes, if you were able to highlight some of these, you will be in good stead, and there's nothing to worry about. So another interesting topic in the UPSC paper this year was this one. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. What does it mean? And in my opinion, this is a gift to people with English literature. It's a real gift. I mean, if you know what the essay topic is pointing at, you could really score very well in this. But for everybody else, I will explain it to the best of my abilities. What it essentially means is that poets, what do poets do? And what is this connection with them being legislators of the world? So let's first try to decipher, unpack. Let's unpack what this means. What do they mean when they say legislators of the world? What is the underlying significance of this phrase, legislators of the world? Legislators of the world means those people, those entities which are able to pass judgment upon it, which are able to comment upon what is right or what is wrong. There is no government in the world which comments on the human existence, human suffering, human condition. There is no government which is bothered, overarching human government which is bothered with human well-being. There isn't any. There are governments which take care of practical things. Countries, they have armies, militaries, economies, various issues which they have to deal with, and they do their best, but they don't comment or have much to say about the human condition at large. They are concerned with their citizens at most, their interests, and so on. The only people who are able to view humanity from that point of view and comment upon it and shine a light on it and put a mirror in front of it so that you and I and everybody else can see the real nature of what is going on are poets, also artists, by the way. Poets and artists fall under that same category as much as this phrase of them being legislators of the world is concerned. So it's not just literature that they do, it's not just fancy words which rhyme well, which sound nice when they ring in our ears. It's what poets do. Poets are able to reflect upon and comment upon the human condition, the human suffering. Okay, they are able to shine light upon things using narratives, using words which illuminate the world for us, which give us wisdom, which give us understanding, which give us a deeper appreciation of what we are doing. They deal with an aspect of reality which nobody else is able to deal with. And they do this because that's what they do. They wish to bring out what is unspoken, to put it into words. And at times the words that they use are sublime, absolutely beautiful. If you talk about poets, one poet who does that, and he did that regularly, is Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran did it all the time. I mean, if you read his book, The Prophet, which I've read a number of times, it is absolutely phenomenal and beautiful prose. It is so beautiful that you'll get goosebumps if you read it carefully. The Prophet. The Prophet. I wish I could read a few words for you. So for those who don't know, The Prophet is a seminal work of poetry by Khalil Gibran, and we are just using it as an example, just intellectual discussions here, about what it means for poets to be legislators of the world. If I was to take an example, I cannot find a better one than Gibran. So we'll talk about that for a bit. And what happens in the poet is very simple. Essentially, this narrative, the character of the book is somebody called Almitra. And so this individual goes to this place, this island. There are villagers there, and they ask him questions. And he answers this question. So somebody asks, tell us about love. And he says something about that, comments, and that's basically a poem, 2 or 3 pages worth of poem. And then somebody else asks, what about crime and punishment? He says something. So the book is the prophet. This individual is the prophet. The people are asking him questions. And it consists of these poems, which are his responses to those questions. Okay. And so just to highlight, here is one of those. It's called On Laws. So then a lawyer asked, what of our laws, master? And he answered, you delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them. Like children playing by the ocean, who build sand towers with constancy and then destroy them with laughter. But while you build your sand towers, the ocean brings more sand to the shore. And when you destroy them, the ocean laughs with you. Verily, the ocean laughs, always with the innocent. But what of those to whom life is not an ocean, and man-made laws are not sand towers? And to whom life is a rock, and the law is a chisel with which they would carve it in their own likeness? What of the cripples who hates dances? What of the ox who loves his yoke and deems the elk and the deer of the forest stray and vagrant things? What of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin and calls all others naked and shameless? And of him who come early to the wedding feast, and when overfed and tired goes his way, saying that all feasts are violation and all feasters are lawbreakers? What shall I say of those save that they too stand in the sunlight, but with their backs to the sun? They see only their shadows, and their shadows are their laws. And what is the sun to them but a caster of shadows? And what is it to acknowledge the laws but to stoop down and trace their shadows upon the earth? But you who walk facing the sun, what images drawn on the earth can hold you? Yet who travel with the wind, what weather vane shall direct your course? What man's law shall bind you if you break your yoke, but upon no man's prison door? What laws shall you fear if you dance, but stumble against no man's iron chains? And who is he that shall bring you to judgment if you tear off your own garment yet leave it to no man's path. People or of Orphalese, you can muffle the drum and you can loosen the strings of the lyre, but who shall command the skylark to sing? This is his commentary about laws, and he's saying essentially that the ultimate law is the law which is laid down by God. The ultimate law is the law which is laid down by the human conscience. And what these laws, the ones you are talking about, are just man-made creatures, and they're like sandcastles which children build. They build it and then they break it, and more sand comes, and that goes on and on and on. And while you may become very engrossed in these laws, these man-made laws, don't forget the real law. Don't forget where the sand is coming from. Don't forget that your shadow is being cast by the sun. Don't forget that the shadow is an illusion. The real thing, the source of all laws, is the sun over there. And that sun over there is the fundamental law. It is the truth. And whatever it is that he's pointing towards, that supernatural entity, that thing, so that's what he's saying. He's saying, take your laws, take your regulations into perspective. They're not the whole truth. The whole truth is a fact that we are here for a limited, brief period of time, and we should be nice to each other in that time, and we should respect and have humility, and not get confused with the fact that just because we are the ones who make laws, we have the power of defining the world. No. That power of making laws is basically just a man-made construct. It's a power which has been delegated by the real source, right? That's what he's saying. See the depth of it, and see the metaphorical language which he uses. He uses the metaphor of the sun, he uses the metaphor of the sandcastle to illustrate the point. Now, which scientific person or which government can do this in this type of prose? That's what poets are able to do. And that is a prime example, ladies and gentlemen. That's what this essay topic is about. If you have the proclivity towards poetry, if you have an inclination, if you understand these things, if you wrote about this, excellent. Even if you can insert some examples, a few, that would be very nice. But so it wasn't a topic for everybody. It was definitely one for people who were into English literature. And another topic which was asked in the UPSC exam this year, and this is an interesting one. History is a series of victory won by the scientific man over the romantic man. Now this is interesting, and this is a universal debate. I have discussed this, spoken about it with my students at length so many times that I can't care to count it. And this is the historical ancient debate about reason and emotions, about logic versus romanticism. That's what it is saying. And I'm not saying that the debate is settled, that this essay topic, see what it says. History is a series of victories won by the scientific man over the romantic man. This is not a settled debate. It may well not be the case at all. We'll have to see. We'll have to analyze it. The point is, the essay topic essentially revolves around this. Is reason superior to emotions? Is science superior to ideals or not? That is the essential debate that this essay topic is trying to address. And what is it? And you see, it then talks of history. History is a series of victories won by the scientific man over the romantic man. Is history that? Is history that? We know that in history, there has been a march towards science. Yes, we know that. We also know that as science has progressed, human civilization has developed. We also know that there were times when science did not develop and human civilization stopped. The progress stopped. An example is the Dark Ages, in the medieval times, when knowledge and science was suppressed by the church, and that led to a regression, right? It led to superstitious thinking, and it led to a few years of wasted intellectual effort. But then there was the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment, and modern science as we know it was then born at that period. And so that progress has been ongoing. We live in that era. We live in that era in which it's obvious that the scientific march of progress is the reason why much of our civilization and much of our technology exists, right? So history is a series of victories won by the scientific man over the romantic man. You would have to first analyze what is meant by history being a series of victories. That what I just mentioned was that. It appears to be that way, yes, that history appears to be a series of victories won by the scientific man over the romantic man, because as science has progressed, ideas have become less and less anthropocentric. I don't want to use technical words here, but I'll give you an example. There was this romantic idea which lasted for thousands of years, in fact, that humans were the center of the universe, that the earth was the center of the universe. In fact, humans were the center of the universe. Some people still believe that. Unbelievable, but true. So it was established dogma. Established dogma. It was so established that if you spoke against it, you could be killed or hanged. And so many people who started to understand that this is probably not the case. Early astronomers, Galileo, Copernicus, many people, Tycho Brahe during that period, started to realize that this is probably not correct at all. It's us who is revolving around the sun. And it also appears that the sun is not the center of anything, that there is that many suns around that. This romantic idea of us being the center, of us being special, was shattered with something called the Copernican revolution. Copernican revolution shattered the idea entirely. And it was suppressed for a long time, until it could be suppressed no more. It came out now, everybody accepts it. Similar idea we had about us being special in the animal kingdom. In the tree of life, humans being very special creatures and being entitled to, being at the top of the food chain and so on. That idea is too getting shattered. It's getting shattered horribly. And it is becoming more and more apparent that humans are not special at all. That yes, they do have some interesting attributes, but it is just an experiment which nature has played, in which it has created hairless apes with extra intelligence. And this extra intelligence may or may not give them some advantages, but it doesn't make them superior to nature or to other creatures. But if you take about other creatures, they are no less special. The sense of smell in a dog is hundreds of times better than the sense of smell in a human being. There are animals who exhibit characteristics and attributes which humans can only dream of. Okay, so genetically speaking, we share, I think, if I'm correct, 99% of our DNA with a chimpanzee and about 95% of the DNA with a banana. All right, with a banana. So what makes us so special? The answer is that we are probably not special. We're not special at all. And so that is the romantic idea which has been broken. So many such romantic ideas you could have spoken about here. You could have spoken about being idealistic. You could have spoken about the fact that, well, one romantic idea which has been shattered over and over again is that man is inherently good. Inherently good. And there was a time when actually there was a romantic movement led by Rousseau. And let's not get into those technical things, those philosophical discussions, academic. We're not talking about academic things at all. We're only talking about interesting intellectual things here. So anyway, Rousseau had this idea that basic human nature is good. Good. Now, science has not proven that it is not good. Science has not proven that it is bad, but it has also not proven that it is good. The fact remains that human nature depends on context. We can be very good, we can be very bad, it all really depends. I mean, we are capable of dropping nuclear bombs on a city of civilians, just as we are capable of using the same nuclear bomb to create free energy for hundreds of thousands of people, the same civilian. It depends on how we use things. What is our ethical standpoint? What is the context? How ugly or good are we wanting to be? That's another romantic idea which has been shattered, right? So we keep on going as we march across this timeline. We find more and more ideas being confirmed by science. It seems to be telling us the truth. Any romantic ideas which we hold conveniently keep getting shattered again and again. When COVID happened, the romantic ideas of anything that people might have had were shattered. It's ultimately science that has given us the vaccine, isn't it? And so this is that type of debate. Now, Like I said, I wouldn't exactly agree with it entirely. What I'm saying is that it's not necessary. The fact of the matter is this, and yes, maybe perhaps history has led us to a march of progress, and that appears to be scientific. But that does not mean that the romantic man or the romantic ideals or the ideals or ethics, you'll have to equate this romantic man with ethics. You'll have to equate this romantic man thing with emotions. It doesn't mean that those things have been thrown out of the window, because that is what makes us human. If you don't have this romantic man side to our nature, then we would be very mechanical, we would be mechanistic, we would be robots. We're not robots. This is the seat of creativity. This is the seat of compassion. This is the seat of empathy. This is the seat of everything that is good in the world. This is the seat of our well-being. This is the seat of our emotional social bonding. You can't throw that away. You need that. We need that. Science helps us bring out the best in us. Science helps us harbor these romantic ideas. It helps us create a world in which we can have these ideas and actually implement them. Think about the idea of universal basic income. Is that not a romantic idea? Everybody will be prosperous. Everybody will have money. Everybody will not have to work. You'll get money for nothing. Universal basic income. Think about automation. Think about the fact that you and I are able to communicate. That I am telling you something, you're able to get that and capture it across time and space using some magical technology. That is a romantic idea. If you ask somebody 100 years ago that this would be possible, they would say this is not possible and this would never ever come to pass. But here it is. And that romantic ideal has now become truth. Why has it become the truth? Because of science. So it is not a competition. History is not a competition between romantic ideas and scientific ideals. It's really a progress with this yin and yang type relationship where they crisscross and they complement each other, where ultimately it really depends on us to what extent do we accept the inconvenient truth which science has given us, to what extent we hold the romantic ideals as important and use science to bring them out into the world, to make a world in which those ideas can be implemented, can be used, can be experienced. That would be a nice conclusion. And that type of analysis would be very cool if you did that. This essay topic in the UPSC Mains 2022 paper, I think somehow, I don't know, the UPSC is really obsessed with ships and the metaphor of the ocean. There are two questions in this year about ships and the ocean. And there was one last year. If you remember, we had this discussion. Last year, there was a question which said that ships don't sink because of water that is around them, but water which gets into them. And here today, we have a question which says that a ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are for. And then there is another question later on about rivers. So anyway, like I mentioned last time, if you remember that discussion, this is a metaphor. This ship that they are talking about is obviously not about naval technology. It's not about ships. It's not about nautical vessels. It's about metaphor. What does the ship stand for? If you remember our discussion from that time, I told you that this metaphor of a ship could be anything which is closed, anything which is existing in some environment. It could be the human body, it could be a cell, it could be a government, it could be an organization, it could be a community. A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are for. It is saying that anything can be safe if it is not put to use, if it does not go outside, if it does not explore. All right, there is safety there. However, progress only happens when that comfort zone is broken. When the comfort zone is broken. Okay, so take us for instance, take people, take humans, take human civilization, take anybody. The value of creativity, the value of curiosity. This curiosity is a very important theme here. Curiosity, creativity, innovation. Going beyond your comfort zone, going into uncharted waters, if I am to carry on with the metaphor, going into uncharted territory. That is what leads us to progress. If we did not explore, if we did not experiment, then we would not progress as fast as we could. If you take ships itself, for instance, are only vessels designed for one thing and one thing only, covering distances across water and initially to explore new lands, right? Christopher Columbus went on one of these trying to find India and found something else entirely, found the New World, found America, the continent. And so, on an individual level, this topic, I would say, is much more about the individual level than the larger level. If you want to talk about abstract, metaphysical type things, you may talk about creativity or innovation, but it is really about the individual's tendency towards growth versus safety, right? So we always have to have a fine line, especially us humans, between what is out there, what is unexplored, what could be out there, and what we have already, right? And this applies to every sphere of life. Should everybody do engineering and become a doctor, or should there be room for creative people? Should there be room for others to explore what they really are doing? But even if that means taking a risk, the idea of risk management is also central to this topic. How do we find our calling? How do we find our passion? How do we find our true profession in this life? If you stick to only safety, then the only possible option for you is to either go join a bank or get a government job, or if you have a business, then stick to that. If you have an established business, don't take a risk. There is a saying which says, if it's not broken, don't fix it. That attitude of being comfortable where things are stable is something that we all have, because we are afraid of the unknown. We are afraid of things which have not yet come to pass. We are afraid of taking risks and breaking our circle of comfort and going beyond it. But at the same time, and now comes the counter argument, it's not always a great idea to send a ship sailing into the waters. Timing is important too. You don't want a ship to head straight into a hurricane and get blown to smithereens. You don't want that either. You want a directed, a calculated risk. You want some sort of a map. You don't just want to go into uncharted waters with no plan, right? So our predicament is always, our confusion, our issue, our confusion is always between stability and exploration. Which one more, which one less, and when? When? Children are very curious. Babies are very curious. Children are very curious. They want to know everything, but they do not know what dangers lie ahead. So what do adults do? What do their caregivers take care of? They take care of the fact that they should be able to explore without getting hurt. That is what a school is supposed to do, right? That is what that whole system of education is supposed to do, so that you are able to explore many things, learn the basic skills which are required in life to make sure that you are able to then direct your own way. Ultimately, go towards growth, but you can't take the growth if you don't become uncomfortable, if you don't go out into uncharted waters. That is the risk. If there is too much risk, you may fall flat on your face and it may become counterproductive. Another interesting thing which argues against it. So every dead body on the Mount Everest, if there is Mount Everest, there is on the ascent, on the climb, there is a place where many climbers were not able to reach the top, because obviously it's very hard, very harsh. There's hardly any oxygen there. So you find dead bodies there. It's a little morbid, but it's the truth. So every person who did not make it was a highly motivated person, highly encouraged to go into the unknown, to conquer the biggest mountain which humanity has to offer. Is that always a good idea? No. So a ship may be safe in harbor. It is not what ships are for, agreed. But It is a matter of intelligent choice when the ship should be in harbor and when it should be set sailing. That is what intelligent life design is about. That is what intelligent risk management is about. That is what intelligent exploration is about. These themes you can touch upon. That is what this essay topic essentially discusses and talks about. It's an interesting essay topic. This metaphor could be used. You could take it in many directions. Take it profession. You could take it into creative professions. You could take it into scientific discoveries. Scientific discoveries are also based on this principle. Nothing is found if you stick to the principles. Revolutions happen, innovations happen, discoveries happen when people start to look where nobody else has looked, and that is risky. A person who does that, a researcher who does that, is taking a risk on their career. You know, nobody believed Charles Darwin initially when he said sail on a ship like this to figure out what is happening with organic life. And he came up with this idea of evolution. And he said that God has not created all these creatures as it is believed in theology. He said this is a intelligent, it's a blind system of evolution. It is a survival of the fittest, and it's basically multiple mutations. And organisms fit themselves to the environment to be able to best survive. And those that are able to survive more are able to reproduce more. And so what you see around us, all these different creatures with different characteristics, are the reason that their ancestors were able to survive. We have the traits today because it helped our ancestors back then. That is true for cats, it's true for snakes, it's true for humans. So that was a very revolutionary and different idea at that point. And he would never have arrived at this idea if he had remained safe. The safe thing at that point was to assume that humans are made by God, and so that's the end of it. So he had to really explore this uncomfort. He went all around the place and suffered many hardships. Recovered, collected specimens to demonstrate. Then he was able to formulate his ideas, and this is one of the biggest ideas. This idea of evolution and natural selection, which is another one of those ideas, scientific ideas, which has completely trumped the romantic idea. So anyway, that's what this essay topic is about. Another interesting topic, this year UPSC MAINS 2022 exam, the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. It's a statement by John F. Kennedy, but it doesn't matter who said it. What matters is that you take the essential idea. So if you remember, we had a discussion about ships. The ship is safe at the harbor, but what happens if it is set sailing? That's not what ships are for. So I told you that the ship is a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor for human growth. It's a metaphor for anything you want to discuss. What is the metaphor being used here? This roof of the house. The idea is you want to repair the roof of the house when the sun is shining. What does it mean to say that the sun is shining? What is it, this house, this structure that can be repaired? What does it point towards? So this is an interesting metaphor. It can stand for anything. It could stand for your career. It could stand for a government. It could stand for an organization, anything. Like I mentioned in the previous discussion. So what does it mean to say when the sun is shining? When the sun is shining essentially means that when times are good, when things are going well, when things are going in your favor. So if you take that to mean for a country, when the sun is shining is when your GDP is doing well, when there is peacetime, when there is no war, when you are not in debt, when everything appears to be going well, like it is going well for the most part, broadly speaking, for India, right? So it is at that time when you should spend time to make things even better, to repair things which are broken. Just because everything is progressing does not mean that everything is perfect, does not mean that everything is fixed. There are things which you can make better upon, which you can improve, right? You can improve the chinks in your armor. It is signifying the importance of proactiveness. Proactiveness, not just reactiveness. Reactiveness would be that you wait in your home, everything is fine, the sun is shining, you enjoy yourself, You don't spend any time in repairing things. You don't spend any time in improving things. Enjoy the good times. And one day the good times will end. A storm will come, or a hurricane will come and wipe the roof of your head. You know, that would be reactive. And then you would go into a firefighting damage control mode where you would figure out what I can do now. And so your options at that point might be very limited. This topic, this statement is saying don't wait for that to happen. Do it before it. Do it at the time when things are good. That is not the time to be lazy. It is not the time to procrastinate. It's not the time to put off those essential things which you have been ignoring. This, when the things are going well, is a time when you should be putting more effort, being proactive, anticipating threats. Now, if you take this to mean, again, take the metaphor to be signifying a country. It might be to improve your industry. It might be to improve your geostrategic relations. It might be to improve your military spending. It might be to make important partners in your area, which may become important trade partners, or it may become important strategic partners if there is a war or if there is conflict. Anticipate that. This is what this topic means. It is saying anticipate the fact that the sun will not shine forever, that there will be dark times. And how you respond to those dark times is not determined upon your reactivity, it's determined on what you did when the sun was shining. How anticipatory, how proactive, how preemptive were you? It talks of that. Preparedness. You can take the idea, use it for a country, use it for a person, use it for a career, use it for self-growth. Whatever you wish to include is fine. But the central idea is this. My favorite topic from this year's UPSC mains paper, you cannot step twice into the same river. It's a statement by Heraclitus. Doesn't matter who he was, doesn't matter at all. This statement is also attributed to the Buddha at times. Again, doesn't matter who said it. The idea was that whoever said it was pointing towards the same thing. What is the thing? This again is one dimension which we have spoken about at length with me and my students. In the course, we discussed this at length, and we had a lot of discussion. This is also one of those ancient debates. It's an ancient debate between stability and change. Very interesting metaphysical debate, which I will be careful not to confuse you about, but the essential idea is this. The idea is that every single thing in the universe is constantly changing. There is only one constant in the world, and that is change. Nothing remains stable, nothing remains the same. Even the atoms in your body are constantly changing. Cells die, new cells regrow. In fact, this cell regeneration, this cell recycling process in your own body is such that in every 7 years, the entire cell structure of your body is replenished. All of your cells die and new ones get formed every 7 years. Okay? So if that is the situation, if that is the pace of change in the world, then what is stable? And this statement means the river is flowing constantly. It changes all the time. It's not the same river because the molecules are not the same, because it doesn't stay still. Because everything else it's changing constantly, right? It is constantly changing. It's a dynamic thing. So are you. Not, if the river is not constant, nor you are constant, then how can you step in the same river twice? You can't. You can't, because everything is constantly changing. That's it. That's the fundamental crux of it. But the idea is very deep. This idea has a spiritual connotation also. It goes directly into religion also. In fact, the Buddhist idea of anicca, impermanence, is essentially this. Impermanence. It says, and it takes it to another level. It says, anicca means that if you think about it, it's not just the physical world that is constantly changing, although there is no question about that. Even science agrees to that. There was the Big Bang and everything has been changing ever since. The laws of physics make sure that there is constant change. Yes, we agree, fine. Things degrade, then deteriorate, then finally die. There is the idea of entropy. But anicca in the Buddhist idea says that even in your own thoughts, in your psyche, nothing is stable. It says contemplate, introspect, notice, meditate, that your thoughts come and go, fleeting emotions come and go, physical sensations come and go, hunger comes and goes, memories come and go. It's a constant flux, quite in fact like a river. And if you observe it from that meditative, introspective point of view, you notice that even inside you, nothing is the same, that everything changes. And so then the idea, the Buddhist idea, then takes you to this examination. It says that if everything is changing and if you are not stable yourself, then what is the observer? Who is the one asking the question? So that's a deep question. Let's not talk about that. It's a spiritual question. But this is what the essay topic is about. You cannot step into the same river twice because everything is constantly changing. Now, what could you have done with it? What could you have written about it? See, this is a type of topic which requires some abstract discussion. You may use examples. There is obviously unlimited examples of things which are changing. There is no end to that. You can use unlimited examples. I am sure you must have done it. All of your examples would have been correct. But somewhere we have to have this abstract discussion between stability and change. Between stability and change. What could we have said about this? That you cannot step into the same river twice because everything is flux, everything changes. However, and this would be our counter argument which we would have to say. However, there are some fundamental truths which do not seem to change. The laws of physics don't seem to change. There is a sense inside us, a sense which brings us the continuity, the sense of I, this observer, which remains constant. I mean, even if your body is changing, in your mind, you are the same person who was born, who then went to school, who then went to college, and who is now watching this video. That continuity in your mind, in your memory is stable. You don't become somebody else in that narrative, right? That is stable. Your personality may be dynamic. Your temperament is stable. Your ideas, your ethics, they remain stable, right? So it is that type of a discussion. It's a deep philosophical, metaphysical type discussion. You can take this in many directions. But here is my personal input. This is it's a hard topic in my opinion. I don't think it is easy to counter argue this topic. I had tried it, and I've tried it for different motivations. It really is one of those fundamental truths. Really, I mean, this is not a topic of discussion. It really is. You can introspect all you want. You will not be able to find things which are an exception to this. Even the laws of physics, started at some point, which are the universal basic laws, started at the time of the Big Bang. And as I don't want to get into a scientific discussion, but long story short, when the Big Bang happened, there was this unified force in physics. The unified force, it was one singular force, it is believed. And this force then split into the fundamental forces which we now observe, which make the world as they are. But not important. The point is, even that was not changed, it has changed. So, the best thing you could have done with this topic is to throw light on how it is that everything changes. That the world changes, physicality changes, the psyche changes, temperament changes, personality changes, right? And then maybe draw it to a conclusion by saying that it is in the middle of all this change, it is in the middle of all this flux, it is in the middle of all this constant evolution that we find ourselves for a brief amount of time. And it is in this constant flux that we must find our stability, that we must anchor ourselves, that we must find our roots, that we must define our meanings, right? And we are the only creatures who are able to do that. The extent to which we are able to define our values roots us into this ebb and flow. It is what makes us stand steadfast. It is what helps us resist this flow. The fact that somebody is able to take a stand of something and not go with the flow is them holding steady, holding steadfast. Every whistleblower in the world who goes against the traditional norms, who goes against tradition, who goes against the company, goes against anything, the government or whatever they are whistleblowing against, is believing in something which is fundamental and so important that they root themselves into it, right? So that is this topic of discussion would be welcome here. And if you could have done that, then I suppose you'll get decent marks. But at some point after, between the examples, this intellectual abstract discussion would be needed to do justice to this topic. Another interesting topic, fascinating topic, in fact, a smile is the chosen vehicle for all ambiguities. And you know, a prime example of this is the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is, of course, perhaps the most famous painting in the world, this one, by Leonardo da Vinci. And you know that there's something called the Mona Lisa smile. It's very popular. Nobody has yet been able to understand what emotion Mona Lisa is trying to exhibit. What was the painter Da Vinci trying to capture? What is the smile? Is Mona Lisa hiding a secret? Is Mona Lisa happy? Is she not happy? Is she sad? There is a lot of confusion, a lot of debate between art historians. But what is the Mona Lisa smile? When it says a smile is the chosen vehicle for all ambiguities, this essay topic is talking about it is about non-verbal body language, non-verbal cues. It's about how we communicate, and how we communicate not only through words, but through our facial muscles, but through gestures, but through non-verbal cues. A smile being one of them, or a smile may be used to convey wickedness, a wicked smile. A smile may be used to convey genuine pleasure or genuine happiness. It may be used to conceal something. I mean, you don't find any politician not smiling anywhere in the world. You don't find a celebrity not smiling, right? So it's an ambiguous signal. It does not reflect what the person is genuinely feeling at all times. That is what this essay topic is saying. A smile is the chosen vehicle for all ambiguities, right? It can also reflect our own ambiguity, our own confusion. It's not necessary that it will reflect what we exactly wish to feel. It can be used to conceal, it can be used to convey. It depends on who is using it and when. And the essay topic, this topic basically says, and it points towards the fact that the human psyche is complex. The human psyche is complex, right? And the way we reflect our emotions, the way we communicate with each other is intermediated by our thinking. So unlike animals, we are able to modulate the way we communicate. We can be deceptive also. You know, there's something called poker face. Poker face. A poker face is essentially a face which does not reflect anything. And the intention is not to reflect anything at all. The people who are playing poker are always trying to understand what type of cards the other person has. Good cards, bad cards. If somebody has good cards, they may show some excitement. They may have a smile. They may become very fidgety. They may become excited. And so they'll give off these signals. The other players will note these signals and figure out that he has something. Better be careful, right? The same thing could happen if somebody else is bluffing in poker. Although I am no poker player myself, but these things are well known. If somebody is bluffing or lying, you want to look at their face, you want to look at their eyes. So, speaking of non-verbal communication, there are many cues which body language experts use. So, you can figure out if somebody is lying or not If somebody is lying, then they may fidget. They may do this or some fidgeting may happen. That's a sign that they may be lying. If somebody is telling the truth, when the police interrogates or anybody interrogates, they ask to tell us what happened, tell us the narrative. If the person is looking towards the right up there like this, in that corner, it means they're remembering things as they happened, remembering things and trying to recite as they happened. If they look over there, it means that they might be imagining things and constructing a story. These non-verbal cues are very subtle, but they're there and they reflect a lot. And but it's sometimes people can be deceptive and manipulative to the extent that it cannot be deciphered. It cannot be deciphered. And so therein lies the complexity of our communication, of our interpretation also. Another thing which you can add to this analysis is that assuming that you or the perceiver sees a smile. Now, the person who is smiling may have something in their mind. Maybe they are being truthful to you. But the perceiver does not experience that. The perceiver has something in their mind in which leads them to a negative conclusion. And they may perceive the smile as something negative entirely. So it's not just us who is reflecting these signals through smiles, sometimes correct, sometimes incorrect, sometimes deceptive, sometimes honest. It's the perceiver also. They may perceive a smile to be completely different from what it really is intending to convey. So it leads to all sorts of ambiguities and permutations, combinations. That's what the essay topic is about. Very interesting topic, I would say, but not easy to write about. Not easy to write about. I feel it's an essay topic in which if you write a few words and sentences, after a while you will run out of points. So for that, I would have to be careful, and I would personally not have chosen it if I was giving the paper. But if you are able to touch upon these discussions of body language, non-verbal cues, etc., you will be fine. That is what it means. So at least you'll be safe on that count. Just because you have a choice does not mean that any of them has to be right. This question in the UPSC mains essay paper is about decision making and ethical decision making at that. It's about ethics. And there's a technique which I teach and I discuss in detail with my students, and that's called steppy dimensions. Steppy dimensions. Spiritual, temporal, economic, philosophical, psychological, ethical. These are dimensions. All topics, almost all topics will fall in one or the other. This one falls in the ethical dimension. The one that we saw before, for instance, this one, it falls in the psychological dimension. It's about communication, it's about facial features, it's about non-verbal cues. This one is in temporal, time, as in is with time, the flow of time, the fundamental basis, the fundamental argument there being, is it stable or gradual? All right, so goes on like that. Now coming to this one is purely and squarely falling with the ethical dimension. It says just because you have a choice does not mean that any of them has to be right. What is it trying to say? It says essentially that you having a choice does not equate to that being right. Now you would have to distinguish between what is choice, only choice, and what is a right choice. Okay, so you may have options. Let me give you an example. Let us assume that you are overweight. Assume you are overweight. I will give you 4 options. You can have McDonald's, KFC, or you can have Maggie, or you can have Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something. I give you 4 choices. It doesn't mean any of them is correct. It might mean that all of them are incorrect, right? So just because there are choices does not mean, more choices does not mean that the correct one is in there. The correct one has to be chosen and determined by different criteria. There's a different criteria for those things. And just presenting choices is not enough. Another choice, You say have X amount of money and you are able to afford cars within a certain segment. And so there are options. Well, options doesn't mean that you should necessarily buy a car at all. Maybe you don't need one. Maybe you should think about the environmental impact and try to minimize it. Maybe you should carpool. Maybe you should use public transport. Maybe you should move closer to your office so that you don't have to get into the hassle at all. Right? So just because if you have choice, it does not mean that any of them has to be right. Essentially says, and it has to, you have to discuss this. There is again some discussion of abstract decision making which has to be done to do justice to this. You can talk about this topic by using examples. You can give various examples, but at some point your examples would have to be clarified and put into this philosophical discussion. Like I gave you the example of food and of cars, etc. But I also mentioned in as many words that just because you have a choice doesn't mean the right one, because they are dependent on different criteria, and more number of choices does not equate to there being more number of good choices. Those words have to be there. That meta commentary, that philosophical discussion has to be there somewhere. I don't think it's justified to only talk about examples and then leave the reader to figure out what the examples are pointing towards. So that I think is important. Now, what could be done with this topic? Various examples could be used. You have to essentially say that what is right or not depends on what values are believed to be important, what values are believed to have primacy at that point of time. Okay. And it also means that a different criteria is required. You could talk about having more number of choices as the modern economy presents to us. Many choices of clothes. You could do online shopping all day long if you had the money for it, but it doesn't mean that you should do that. You can scroll Facebook and Instagram all day long. You have many choices. There are hundreds of content creators, all designed, all of them trying to catch your attention. Choices are infinite. It doesn't mean that that is the right thing for you to do. So then, who decides? And how do you break out of this cycle of having choices but not being able to figure out if it's the right one or not? You need to take a step back. Take a step back, determine what is important, determine what values are really truly internally important, and take decisions based on those. Here, in this topic, you can talk about rational decision making criteria. You can talk, if you are a student of public administration, perhaps you have heard of satisficing and how decision making in real life is not rational, and it's only a limited number of choices that we are able to calculate. You may even discuss artificial intelligence, because it may have choices, but it has no idea, it has no knowledge, it has no instinct of what is right or wrong. So examples of a self-driving car, I mean, the choice, if it has a choice to hit an old man versus a young child, that doesn't mean that it has the right set of choices in front of it or the right criteria to decide it. So a nice conclusion to it can be that, well, there may be many choices. The criteria to decide which choice is appropriate, which choice is important, which choice is worth exploring is up to us, right? And so while we may not be able to create all choices for us, and the world gives us choices as they come across us, right? As we encounter choices, the criteria to decide what is important and not lies within us. And that criteria is determined by our values. And those values are determined by our upbringing, by our peers, by our teachers, by our mentors, by our role models, by everything that we learn from. And in that, we have some say. In that, we have some discretion. In that, we have some choice to decide whether or not to go in this direction or the other. And the ability, more importantly, to know, to understand that not all choices are good is itself a sign of maturity. It's a sign of metacognition. It's a sign of somebody having access to the bigger picture. And that is true intelligence. That is wisdom. Something like that you could have said and then concluded. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how all many of these topics could have been handled.